Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Sleep Detective podcast, where good health, sleep, and longevity are inevitable. Today, I want to talk about some of the mistakes I made on my journey of figuring out my sleep and finally being able to consistently sleep well. So, when I suddenly couldn't sleep in late pregnancy, which was my son's about to turn 8, so we're talking about almost 9 years ago. I actually made a lot of mistakes in the beginning that made my sleep even worse. And I struggled for 2 years trying to figure things out before I finally started sleeping better. And then it really took me a couple more years to consistently sleep 8 plus hours a night and wake up feeling rested. So, in this episode, I want to tell you the mistakes I made so that hopefully you don't make those same mistakes. I could have gotten better so much quicker if, of course, I knew then what I knew now. We can always say that looking back. But again, my goal with this episode is to share these things so that your journey can be a lot faster than mine. So, one of the first mistakes I made was trying to follow all the sleep rules. That's what I call them, right? So when you Google how to sleep better, the same generic advice comes up everywhere. And it's really things that are hard to do. And you can kind of drive yourself crazy trying to be perfect about these things. So, I stopped watching screens before bed. Which meant stop watching TV with my husband before bed. I made sure I didn't eat chocolate after 4 o'clock. Some things were beneficial, like, I've always been a big exerciser, but after I had my son, I was just so tired and not sleeping well all the time. And, I was nursing him. And so, I used to do a lot of strenuous exercise. So I felt like that a walk wasn't even worth it. So I just wouldn't do anything for a few days in a row. And that, of course, made me feel awful and wasn't helping with my sleep. So some of the rules are helpful. I'm not saying that these things aren't helpful, but again, I think that it can become more stressful to try to follow these rules. And I remember, it's like I mean, for me at this time, I was having a hard time falling asleep, even though I was exhausted. And then I would wake up at 3 or 4 every night and, be up for a couple hours until 6. And then that's when my son was waking up. So I could never catch up on sleep. And so yeah, what I learned is that trying to follow all these rules isn't going to help with that kind of chronic insomnia. And, it's like every now and then I get a good night's sleep and I try and recreate that the day before exactly how it was, right? Eat the same thing, do the same exercise, do the same thing before bed. And then I wouldn't sleep well the next night. So it's like there's no rhyme or reason to it, which was so frustrating. And so trying to do all the right things really got to me. And I also want to say those things can help if someone has trouble sleeping every now and then. It's not the solution for chronic insomnia, as you know, because you've probably tried all of those things. That's not enough to help someone who's been dealing with sleep issues for a long time. Now, one of the other things I did that I realized really didn't help was getting upset about it. Now, my background was that I had been a great sleeper all my life. I always took it for granted, of course, but I also always cared about my sleep. Like I was really sensitive to being sleep deprived. So once I had my son, who was a horrible sleeper, I'm like, what have I done? I had this great life before now. Now I'm not going to sleep for the next 12 years. And, I was this is an example of how much I valued my sleep even before I had sleep issues. So I, for a while, worked on an organic farm and I had to wake up at 6 in the morning to be there at 6:45. And I used to have dinner parties with my friends and boyfriend over. And at 10 o'clock, I would go to bed while everyone else is still there hanging out. I'd be like, I have to get up at 6. See you guys later. Like, so I've always cared about my sleep and needed sleep. So when I all of a sudden in late pregnancy wasn't sleeping, I was really upset about it. And then when my son was born and I wasn't sleeping because of him, but also once I hired a sleep consultant to help with his sleep and he started sleeping well, then I still wasn't sleeping. And I just remember crying in the middle of the night multiple times, like just awake and so frustrated that being so exhausted and all I want to do is sleep. So I'm not saying it's not a totally normal reaction, but I learned over the years that that also wasn't helping. Getting upset only made it worse. It only made my body more stressed. It only made my body release more cortisol, which was making my sleep even worse. And so, what I talk to my clients about now is in the moment, accepting that you aren't sleeping and not judging it, not getting upset. I know this is easier said than done, and this is definitely a practice, but realizing that getting upset isn't helping anything. And when you are awake in that moment in the middle of the night, there's nothing you can do about it. And so getting upset doesn't help. I'm not saying the next morning you don't decide to take action and do something about it. Absolutely. I'm not saying you just accept this for the rest of your life. I'm just saying in that moment, you accept it because that is going to give you the most peace, which is going to help you go back to sleep faster than you would if you actually got upset. Now, another thing I realized that I did was I talked about my sleep all the time and I researched about sleep all the time. It really became a part of my identity, like not being able to sleep. I remember, I would wake up in the morning and my husband would say, "How'd you sleep?" And I would tell him about how awful it was. And then I would get to work. And the first thing I would do is complain to my coworkers about how tired I was and how I didn't sleep well. And then, if I hung out with my friends later in the day, I would always talk about my sleep. And so that, again, like it became I started seeing myself as that's who I was, as someone who couldn't sleep. And that can easily become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so, again, one of the first things I recommend with my clients is to just stop talking about it, right? You can tell your husband, you can tell your friends that they ask you, say, "Do you know what I've decided I'm not going to talk about anymore because I'm figuring it out." And of course, this helps when you have a plan that you're working on, like working with my team and me. But I do recommend stop complaining, stop talking, stop researching about it all the time, and just make a decision of the path that you want to follow and do that, and then stop all the research so that you're not, you know, the more you think, I can't sleep, the more your brain wants to prove you right. That's what our brains do. And so then the more it's going to not be able to sleep. Now, I'm not saying that this is the only answer. Obviously, and I'll talk about this too. There's more to it than that, but that is part of it. Another thing I did was I guessed at every single supplement under the sun. So I was actually working at a health food store managing the supplement department. So I did that for about 6 years. So I knew every supplement we had on the shelves that was supposed to help with sleep. A different supplement, rep would come in from certain companies and be like, "This is going to help." I tried what seemed like everything, and I had access to these things, at a lower cost. And so I really guessed at so many different things: melatonin, magnesium, all kinds of sleep formulas, anything that I could get my hands on, because I didn't want to go to I didn't want to get on sleeping pills. I knew that my doctor wouldn't be able to help. I've been into alternative health for most of my adult life, and so I didn't want to get on a sleep aid. So I was trying the natural route, trying all these different supplements, like many of my clients have done. And I'm not judging anyone if you have resorted to taking sleeping pills. If I had continued not sleeping the way I was, at some point I probably would have done that because it's miserable to not be able to sleep. But just guessing at supplements, again, like the melatonin, the magnesium, the CBD, like melatonin's only going to work for you if you're deficient in melatonin. And that's the main reason why you aren't sleeping. That's not the case for most people. Same with magnesium. Many of my clients actually need magnesium, and we see that in their tests, but there's more to it than just magnesium. There's also all the minerals need to be in balance with each other. And you need a healthy gut to absorb magnesium from food and supplements. And magnesium, needs other minerals and vitamins for it to be able to be absorbed. And so there's always more to it than just magnesium or just melatonin or just any one supplement. And so that leads me to my next point, is that I didn't realize the physiological role that was why I wasn't sleeping. So Again, I've cared about health, like, in my early 20s when I moved to Jackson Hole, I worked at the library as a reference librarian, and somehow I came across nutrition books and started reading about them and just became fascinated. I had no health issues, I was totally healthy at the time, so that kinda started my journey of learning more and more about health. I ended up getting a master's in nutrition many years later, and I just really have ever since then just loved learning about health and nutrition. And so I also thought of myself as a very healthy person. And any doctor I went to, for a physical would say, "Oh, you're so healthy," right? Like I don't have any health issues. I exercised, I ate organic, I took some supplements. Looking back, I can see I definitely did some things wrong. I overexercised. I drank too much alcohol. I ate too much at times. I stressed my body in those ways. But I was a generally very healthy person until at age 39 in late pregnancy, I couldn't sleep anymore. And so, in my journey of trying to figure all this out, I tried to follow all the sleep rules like we talked about. I ended up taking an adult sleep certification, hoping that it would help me. I was very skeptical because I'm like, I'm doing all the right things. I know all the right things, right? That actually did help me a little bit. Again, with like the not getting upset, the not talking about it all the time. Those things actually helped my sleep for a bit. And then I went through another stressful period and my sleep deteriorated again and nothing worked. All the things I thought I knew didn't work, even what I learned in that certification. And luckily, I came across someone who was using this functional lab testing to help people with insomnia. And just this light bulb went off in my head like, this makes so much sense. There's got to be something more going on. And so that was my journey. And it took a long time for me to figure that out. So I'm hoping that I can shorten that time frame for you. Because if you aren't sleeping normally, and especially if you've tried following the sleep hygiene, especially if you've done CBTI and none of those things have worked, if you have any other symptoms of any kind, then there are imbalances in your body that are actually causing your sleep issues. And, like I said, doctors always told me I was healthy. My blood work always came back perfect. I did these lab tests. I had a parasite. My cortisol was through the roof in the middle of the night, likely from that parasite. And I think I'd had that parasite for 15 years and didn't know it. And it took that long for it to damage my gut and cause all these chain reactions that finally led to me not sleeping. I also had heavy metals like uranium and copper toxicity. I had gluten sensitivity. I did have major hormone imbalance. Probably not surprising after having a child at age 39. So, all of these things made so much sense that, oh, they were causing my insomnia. And once I started correcting those, I started sleeping better and better and better. So, understanding that insomnia is just a sign that your body isn't healthy. And even if you care about your health like I did, even if you're conscious about it and want to be healthy, by the time you can't sleep normally, multiple systems in your body are out of whack and not working properly. And so that's why, again, the one supplement isn't going to help. Even just addressing, like if I had just addressed a parasite, for example, but didn't also look at my hormones and the heavy metals and the food sensitivities, I probably wouldn't have gotten better. And so this brings me to my last mistake is waiting to get help. And this might look different for me than it did for you. I mean, like I said, it took me 2 years to find out about this functional lab testing. I still wanted to DIY it. So I went through the program. I ended up becoming certified in this functional lab testing. So that took a lot of time, right? It took me, I actually fast tracked the program. So it took me like 5 months to do it, and you don't get to do any tests until halfway through that point. And, but I was determined to do it myself. And I realized looking back that I could have just hired someone who already knew these tests and what to do about them, and I would have gotten better so much faster. And I will say too, like once I became certified and graduated, started helping people with this, I still wasn't sleeping perfectly. It was so much better than before, but I still had plenty of random nights where I was awake for a while in the night. I still, around my period, would my sleep would get way worse. Around the full moon, my sleep would get way worse. And it wasn't until I learned about neurotransmitters and decided, hey, I'm going to try a neurotransmitter test, see if this is something I want to run on my clients. I found out that I was deficient in serotonin and GABA, and I started supplementing with those, and I just started sleeping consistently well. So that was like the final missing piece for me. Now, I still had to address all the other things that I addressed, but again, by waiting, by not actually, wanting to invest and having someone help me, it took so much longer for me to get better. So, so my goal with all of my clients now is I want to keep learning. I want to speed up how long it's going to take someone to improve. So again, that's why I did the neurotransmitter test, and I'm so glad I did, because now that's something that I use in my programs with all of my clients. So my goal is for you not to have to go through this prolonged journey. My goal is to make it as fast as possible. And so, really, the way to sleep better is to find the imbalances in your body that are keeping you awake. And yes, you want to make sure your mind isn't sabotaging your sleep too, but you can't just do CBTI. That's not going to be enough if you also have a parasite, for example, like I did. So this was really the missing piece for me for 2 years, and it's likely the missing piece for you too. And I will say I even work with a lot of clients who have seen other functional medicine practitioners, naturopaths, things like that, and they still haven't gotten better. And what's usually missing is someone focusing on sleep and focusing on the big picture. So, in my programs, I use 4 different lab tests because I don't want to miss anything, right? Again, we can't just address gut health and ignore hormones and heavy metals and expect to get better. So, my goal is to find all the missing pieces for each person so that nothing's missed. And then your body can get back in balance so you can sleep normally. So my team and I use these 4 lab tests. We also, use some assessments when people sign up to get this big picture. And the tests look at gut health, liver function, hormone balance, cortisol, heavy metals, minerals, neurotransmitters, and more, so that we get all the pieces to find exactly what's causing your insomnia. It's a little bit different for everyone. Not everyone has a parasite. Maybe a fourth of our clients do. Almost everyone has some sort of pathogen, but we deal with a parasite differently than we deal with H. pylori, other bacterial growth, or candida. So knowing what pathogen you have is really important. So I know what changed for me with the lab testing was I didn't feel out of control and helpless anymore. Like, one of the worst things about not sleeping is just feeling like you're trying to do all the right things and you can't figure out why you can't sleep. So, with these tests, you will know exactly why you can't sleep and have a plan to fix them. So, I created the Insomnia Insight program to include the 4 lab tests, the assessments, and then we give you a holistic plan looking at diet, looking at lifestyle, recommending supplements to correct the imbalances and really get your body back in balance. So you don't have to guess at supplements or resort to sleeping pills or take years to get better. And then you also get a 30-minute private session with a sleep coach to get any questions answered, once we give you your results and recommendations. And you can find out more and sign up for that at the sleepdetective.com/insomnia-insight. The link for that is in the show notes as well. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening, and I will talk to you next week.